Hi everybody, welcome back to our lecture series, lecture trilogy on listening, critical thinking, and logical fallacies. This is the final lecture in that trilogy where we're going to be reviewing and going over logical fallacies. But before we dive in, I just want to share a word of advice when it relates to logical fallacies. Logical fallacies are things that should be thought of with a grain of salt. We don't want to think about logical fallacies as being the end of an argument or seeing a logical fallacy as being something that negates the value of some reasoning or of an argument. And we want to think about it in that sense because, number one, some logical fallacies are accurate. They exist in the world. There are some slippery slope arguments that are reasonable and logical. So just having a slippery slope logical fallacy within your argument doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad argument. So we want to think about them as being aspects of things that change the way we evaluate an argument, change the way we think about things. The other thing, and this is more from a personal stance, is that I was the assistant coach of the debate team at Sacramento State for a couple of years while I was in graduate school. And I judged some extremely high-level debates. And at no point in my debate experience did I ever hear somebody call out a logical fallacy in a debate. So in my mind, if the people at the top level of debate are not using these fallacies as offense, as ways to take away from an argument, we shouldn't be doing that in our day-to-day lives either. So logical fallacies are something to be aware of, to be able to identify, but to understand that those things are not a sure way to determine if a source or if an argument is valuable or credible. So logical fallacies are these complex things that we want to think about from a variety of different perspectives that will help us to analyze information in a more complex way, just like all of those concepts from evaluating evidence, just like triangulation, just like what Mike Caulfield talked about in online verification. Logical fallacies should, an understanding of logical fallacies should add to that. So in this lecture, we're going to define what a logical fallacy is, and then we're going to go over some of the three different types of logical fallacies. We'll go over fallacies of emotion, of ethics, and of logic. First and foremost, we want to think about what is a logical fallacy. Quite simply, it's an argument flawed by its nature or structure. Now you might be thinking, if it's flawed by its nature or its structure, that should take away from the value of that argument just straight out of the gate. And that's not a wrong way to think about it, but it's a very narrow way to think about logical fallacies because they do function and exist in the real world in actual arguments that determine policy and laws and rules and regulations and administrative principles and class structures. They impact a variety of different things. So we do need to care about them because if we are aware of them, if we say, okay, we want to avoid these arguments that are flawed by their nature and structure, even though they exist in the real world and can be useful, we will make better arguments if we avoid them. We will be harder to persuade if we understand them. We will be more effective critical thinkers if we can identify them. So in order to achieve these three things, we need to understand the three different categories of fallacies, which are fallacies of emotion, ethics, and logic. So quite simply, right now, just make sure that you know that a logical fallacy is any argument that is flawed by its nature or structure. We'll determine some of these different fallacies here in just a minute, and we'll analyze some different arguments that highlight problems with the nature of the reasoning or the structure of the argument. So first and foremost, we have fallacies of emotion. We have two fallacies here. We have scare tactics and slippery slope fallacies. A fallacy of emotion that we would call scare tactics is when you exaggerate the possible dangers beyond their statistical likelihood. There's a term in statistics called de minimis. And what this means is that it's so statistically insignificant that it's so unlikely that there's no reason to even think about it. There are so many things in our world that are so statistically unlikely that we should never worry about them. But yet, I'm not going to go swimming in an area that is known to have great white sharks. I understand that that's not likely going to happen, but I'm still not going to do it. So scare tactics are logical fallacies that are built on our human irrationality. And we want to be aware of this because our irrationality, our fear, can be a very, very powerful motivator. For me, I'm not getting in the water where there might be a shark, which is pretty much all of the ocean. And yes, you're correct. I'm not getting in the ocean. I don't feel like I'm supposed to be there. So any argument that builds on my inherent fear of being in the ocean would be very, very persuasive for me if I wasn't aware of that. And I can say, this person is trying to scare me. Why? Right? And now I can think more critically about it. In the cartoon we have here, it says, Mr. Frog lost the election after Mr. Donkey convinced everyone that if Mr. Frog became the school dean, soon enough the entire university would be run by frogs. So we have a little bit of political satire here that highlights how scare tactics may be used in an actual political sense. So scare tactics, exaggerating possible dangers beyond their statistical likelihood, they are very, very improbable, but yet may still scare us. So we want to be aware of scare tactics. Next, we have slippery slope fallacy, which portrays a minor misstep as a slide toward disaster. Our cartoon here says, if you let a bully come in your front yard, he will be on your porch the next day, and the day after that, he will eat your babies. And then we have a little turtle saying that escalated quickly. Because a slippery slope escalates quickly. A slippery slope fallacy says this is going to happen and then this is going to happen without addressing any of the steps in between. So slippery slope arguments come up a lot, or they get called out a lot when people are talking about climate change and or global warming. Climate change and global warming are two different things, but we're not going to get into that in this particular lecture. A slippery slope argument related to climate change is where somebody says, if we don't do this now, 10 years from now, this terrible thing could happen. And the idea there is that we're going from point A to point D without addressing the other things. Now, again, this is tricky because that might be true, right? Especially in relation to climate change. There's so many variables, there's so many unknowns, there's so many things going on that a minor misstep may lead to some kind of catastrophic event. A drought may lead to catastrophic wildfires, right? So these things, again, this is just to highlight that these arguments may not be fundamentally perfect, but they do exist and they may be true in the world. So we want to be able to evaluate them and think about them from a critical stance. Why is this person using this particular argument? Are they doing it to manipulate me, or are they doing it to highlight that this could actually happen? With scare tactics and with slippery slope fallacies, both could be possible. So you want to just be aware of them. Think about how your human brain is going to process fear and emotion. There was a book that recently came out. It was called Thinking Fast and Slow. And the cognitive scientists researched how we think as humans. And they determined that we have a fast brain and a slow brain. Our fast brain is the brain that's functioning all the time. These are the things that are responsive, right? Their fear, their emotion. Our slow brain is our analytical brain. It's where we take a second, take a step back, take a deep breath, and think about what we are engaging with. We want to engage with our slow brain more often. When you hear a logical fallacy, that should trigger your fast brain to say, oh, we need to take a step back and analyze this with a little bit more detail. So there's a bunch of different fallacies. You can look them up. You can find just so many of them, but these are two of the most common scare tactics, slippery slope, so keep an ear out for them. Next up, we have fallacies of ethics. We have two. We have ad hominem and stacking the deck. Again, very, very common logical fallacies. So ad hominem is when you attack the character of a person rather than their argument. So if you're in a debate and somebody proposes a claim, and rather than respond to that claim, you say, or somebody says to you, well, you were just stupid. That's a logical fallacy, and we would say that that's a fallacy of ethics. It's unethical. You're not even engaging with the argument at hand. You are simply attacking the person rather than the argument, and that doesn't have any value to us as people, as critical thinkers. You'll be shocked, now that you've seen this, how often you're going to come across it, especially in social media and online platforms. It's a very, very common thing. So when you attack the character of a person rather than their argument, you are engaging in an ad hominem logical fallacy, which is a fallacy of ethics. Our cartoon here says, your ad hominem attacks are evidence that your arguments are baseless, wrote user 226. Rodney began typing his reply, you appear to be too stupid to understand the difference between an insult and an ad hominem attack. So hopefully you see the irony there. We're attacking the person because they don't understand the logical fallacy by using the logical fallacy. The point of this logical fallacy is we want to focus on what is being said, not on the person saying it, which is really, really, really difficult. So it's something that, again, you're going to have to engage that slow brain and to think. Take a deep breath, balance out your emotions before you engage in these ad hominem attacks. Next up, we have stacking the deck. And this is when a source only shows one side of a story or of an argument. So typically the source only shows the side that either benefits them or that they agree with, and this is called confirmation bias. So when you see an argument that is stacking the deck, you're saying, we only see one side of this story. Now you might be thinking, maybe there is only one side to that story because the other side doesn't warrant analysis because it's so problematic, or there isn't another side, right? Because there's no evidence to support it. That may be true, but we still want to evaluate it. If you're thinking about it in that sense, you're not stacking the deck. You're thinking about those other sources, those other ideas, and that's good. We don't want to just think about the one thing that is being said as the sole focus of that. Most of the things that we come across in our day-to-day life, there isn't a cut and dry, right or wrong, yes or no type of answer. So when we only focus on one aspect of a thing, we're losing out on all of the other aspects that come with that. When we only focus on one aspect of climate change, we lose out on the analysis, on the learning, on the information that comes with all the other aspects of it. And that severely complicates things, which is why we typically see only one or two sides of any particular story. But that complication is a good thing. It shows that we're thinking about things in a more thorough, more critical manner. So we want to avoid stacking the deck. We want to avoid showing just one side of a story or of an argument. That's, again, there's not always going to be a back and forth. There's not always going to be multiple sides to an argument. But we want to evaluate if there could be. And that'll keep us from stacking the deck. It'll keep us from engaging in that particular logical fallacy. We want to avoid attacking the character of a person. We want to focus on their arguments. This will create much more useful and educated public discourse. So the next time you see an attack on a person or you see somebody only focusing on one aspect, think to yourself, that's a logical fallacy. Now evaluate it. And hopefully your slow brain will be engaged. You'll be harder to persuade. You'll be harder to scare. You'll be harder to get emotionally engaged with. And that's a good thing because it'll keep us thinking more critically. Our final category of fallacies are fallacies of logic. We have two. We have hasty generalization and equivocation. A hasty generalization fallacy is when an inference is drawn from insufficient evidence. So our cartoon here says, I've never seen food that is not circle-shaped. All food is therefore definitely circle-shaped. The other side, I have never seen food that does not have straight edges. So hopefully you see we're drawing massive generalizations based on one particular piece of evidence. This is another very, very common logical fallacy. We jump to conclusions based on a very limited scope. So if you're thinking about this and you're thinking about evidence and thinking about information, we need to draw on a very, very broad amount of information. We want to show a breadth and depth in our research when we are talking about things so that we don't draw hasty generalizations. We don't jump to conclusions with insufficient evidence. This is really, really important because you'll start to see this. Again, like all of the fallacies that we've covered today, if you think about them, you will start to see them all over the place. Hasty generalization is a particularly tricky one because it requires that we have a little bit of a detailed understanding of the thing. So be aware of anytime you hear somebody drawing a conclusion from limited or insufficient evidence. Then we have equivocation. So these are half-truths or lie that give an honest appearance through tricks of language. So equivocating is really, really interesting because it gives us an opportunity to analyze the use of language when it comes to lying, when it comes to being deceptive. So our cartoon here says, the queen told the curious little crane that she could have jam every other day, but never today, since today was not any other day. So what the queen is telling our little crane here is that you can have jam every other day except for the day that you want it. So they're saying no, right? You can't have any jam ever. But instead of saying that, saying, yeah, you can go ahead and have some every other day except for today. And then tomorrow will be today, and then the next day will be today. So therefore, logically speaking, based on that argument, you can never have any jam. Equivocating is quite complex. It requires that you think about what is being said and think about it from a variety of different perspectives and in a very detailed manner in order to pick up on it. Equivocating is if you come across somebody who is good at equivocating, it's very, very difficult to have an argument with them or to have any kind of discourse because they live in the gray area. They're always moving things around, moving pieces subtly without ever getting to that final point. And equivocating is a very, very effective way to draw attention away from a topic. It's usually a strategy that is employed when the person who is in argument doesn't want to actually talk about the topic of that argument. So we have two different fallacies of logic here. We have hasty generalization, which you'll see all over the place. So when we draw inferences from insufficient or incomplete data. And then we have equivocating, which is where we have half-truths or lies that are given an honest appearance through tricks of language. So they're not true, they're not false, they're in the middle, and they're used to detract or distract from a particular topic. And this gets us to the end of our brief lecture on logical fallacies. We defined what they are. We talked about fallacies of emotion, fallacies of ethics, fallacies of logic. The last thing that I'll leave you with is just a quick reminder of that warning that I gave at the beginning of the lecture. Logical fallacies are going to be found all over the place. Being able to identify them is important because you will have stronger arguments. You'll be harder to persuade, but they are not things that should end a conversation. They are things that should trigger to you that you want to think about something in a more complicated manner, more detailed manner. You want to engage your slow brain. So the next time you hear a logical fallacy, say to yourself, hey, that's a hasty generalization. Okay, I need to think about this. And then take a step back and think about that thing. Maybe do a little bit of research before you draw a conclusion. Anytime you come across any of these logical fallacies, do some research and see if you can determine whether or not it's a useful or not a useful argument. This concludes our trilogy lecture series on listening, critical thinking, and logical fallacies. I hope that you feel as if you're more equipped to handle the massive amount of information that we interact with on a daily basis. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Take care.